Hello, welcome back to Dr. Introspect TV, and it's your host, Dr. Introspect, and I'm back. Alright, that's our intro. Today I'm bringing our regular scheduled programming featuring the typical movies/series analysis and deep dive that we do here on the channel. Just checking in, how did you enjoy our last couple of videos, especially the one on the silhouette challenge? That was something I think I'm going to be doing more of, commentary on pop culture and cultural deeper issues, and let me know if you want more of those in the comments. As usual, if this is the first time you are coming to the channel, please hit subscribe if you enjoy this content, and click on the notification bell so that you are informed every time I drop a new video. And of course, oldies and goodies, thank you for tuning back in. Alright, so today I selected a show that was actually number 1 in the Netflix top 10, and I was curious what's going on there. So I'm bringing to you an analysis on Firefly Lane. Stay tuned. Okay, so just a brief background. These characters, as you see here, are the people that most of this analysis is going to be based on. We have the star of the show, Katherine Heigl, playing the role of Tully Hart, and her best friend, Kate Merlarkey, is played by Sarah Chalk. I hope I'm saying their names right. That's what we have here. What I would say was particularly interesting about this story is that the setting was almost 2 decades behind. So the setting of the story is in the early 2000s and 2003 to be precise, and there are a couple of flashbacks to the younger years in the 80s and things like that. So I think despite it being like almost 2 decades old for the setting, it still feels somewhat relatable. Some of the challenges they're having, with the smartphone technology, the age of the BlackBerry, feeling like online dating is crap and all of those things. We are here 2 decades later, and I mean, as young people, we're still feeling the same struggles. If you're in your 20s and you're doing online dating, you feel like it just goes nowhere, right? It just feels like the dating culture as a whole is just horrible. So as someone that is in the present day 2021 era, hearing these kind of sentiments that I can relate to, I'm wondering, has it always been like this, or did it just get significantly worse for my generation? So just something I wanted to just touch on there before I dive right in. So this show is actually in the drama genre, so if you're someone that is looking for something that would make you feel things, because there are a couple of feelings that go on as you watch the show, this is probably a show for you. So with drama genres, don't expect much of things like comedy or jokes as much, just a lot of intense moments, and I guess that's what kept me watching. Even though I was kind of curious as to why it was number 1, I kept going more so because of the intensity of this story. And I know by just mentioning these words, you already have an idea that I am going to be dwelling on the mental health aspects of this show. This is going to be another video that will fall into my Codependency attachment style series. I have a video of the Netflix South African movie titled Seriously Single, where I did an analysis of different attachment styles, and I touched on codependency briefly. I also looked at codependency in my other video Kissing Booth 2 analysis, so definitely check those 2 videos out. I'll leave the links below so that you can get more of this learning and lessons in different forms and structures, and probably something you find more relatable. Of course, share this content if you find it valuable. So here we have the typical dynamic, 2 best friends, Tully and Kate, who are severely codependent on each other. So I'm going to start first of all analyzing each character separately, and then I'm going to talk about how they come together and interact and create this whole dynamic that I actually think is toxic. So here we have Tully, and much of this story is centered on her life and her upbringing and how she became who she is. And just off the bat, you can see that Tully is a person that has a dismissive attachment style. Now, if you're familiar with toxic personalities and some disorders, you might want to quickly type Tully as a narcissistic personality disorder, but in this video I'm not going to be throwing around the word disorder, but I would say just off the bat you can see some narcissistic traits. But I personally, in my opinion, I don't feel that she is a full-blown narcissist, okay? I feel she has more of an attachment problem, and yes, personality disorders are also attachment disorders, they are attachment problems, but I think hers doesn't have the manipulative, exploitative aspects that are often associated with malignant characters. See, here is a woman that is just afraid of love and was never shown love growing up, and has always had this fear of abandonment and fear of feeling like she's not worthy of love and she's not enough, and she needs to always have the attention in her because she never got any when she was young. So if you watch the story, you feel really sorry for Tully, and you can already see how she became the way she is. And I would just like to say her upbringing is textbook one of the ways that narcissists are made, for sure. You have a parent that was not there for the child at all. So her mother was a drug addict, and she didn't create a safe space or loving environment for Tully as a young girl, so much so that Tully had to tell people, neighbors, and even her friends that her mother had cancer, because that would be the only way to make sense of why you have a mother that isn't involved in your life, while you haven't eaten, while bills haven't been paid, and you're in darkness, and she's not showing up to PTA meetings, and just a really absent mother in your life. But she's not absent because they do live in the same house, and she's literally at home every day, smoking, drinking, just doing whatever, and she doesn't really care about her daughter. She wasn't even really present for even when she had like her first period or things like that. She had to figure things out on her own. And what was really painful was when she was a teenager, and as kids, you go out, you want to hang out with boys, you want to mess around a little, and you're not thinking it's going to go beyond kissing, but then you don't know that you're hanging out with a senior that is morally depraved, and he ends up raping her, and she had no one that she could talk to this thing about, literally no one. Sadly, that trauma stayed with Tully for the rest of her life, and she felt so helpless. And I think that is one of the things about rape that people don't really understand. That feeling of helplessness is what I think that video was trying to capture, where they flash back to where she was a kid, and she was lost, or she couldn't find her mom, right about like 4, 5, 6 years old, and she's just feeling dizzy and scared and looking for her mom. So that flashback scene is something they always kept going back to when they wanted to show Tully feeling scared, feeling like she's losing control, feeling like she's feeling abandoned, and things like that. And that was precisely the scene that flashed back to when she was being raped by the senior, and she just had to live with that trauma, and it stuck with her forever. Other than the absence of love, and of course her mother being an addict, she demonstrated some of these narcissistic traits that addicts can tend to have. Because remember, narcissism, they are addicted to the narcissistic supply, and for drug addicts, their supply is whatever the substance is, and they would become narcissistic because of the substance. They would do anything to get the drug, and it really brings out a lot of ugliness and hatefulness in that character. So her mother, even though she wasn't loving and having her time creating a safe space, she was very mean to Tully. There was no physical abuse, but there was a lot of emotional abuse. She would verbally attack her, and she wasn't screaming or yelling, but there are always these subtle put downs about how, you know, she is not going to be a great person, or how she's not going to amount to anything in life, or about how the job she's gotten is not as great as some other job she could have gotten. Just all the subtle digs and belittling. They were really emotionally abusive. That is enough to create a person that becomes very insecure, terrible self-esteem, and hate themselves because their own mother didn't love them. And of course, Tully never met her dad, so this is the only parental figure, the only first experience of love, and everything is so hateful. So she probably internalizes this as any child would, and they come to the conclusion that they are not worthy of love, they don't deserve love. I mean, of course, their mother didn't love them, so nobody else in this world will. And what they do is they create this shield around them. They create an alternate self that they show the world and hide who they really are, because they are so scared that if anybody got to see who they really were, they would run away. They would reject them because that's what their mother did. And sometimes what you find people like this doing in relationships is they would reject you first, okay, because they feel this is what has happened before. You know, repetition compulsion I've talked about before. They are recreating these dynamics from the childhood over and over again, and sometimes they initiate the rejection because then they feel more in control. If I reject you first, then you don't have to reject me. So if I reject you and our relationship falls apart, even if they're not doing the rejection knowingly, you know, they're probably just being mean and they are unconscious, okay? So they are unconscious of these dark parts of themselves and these fears that they have, and it comes out in subtle ways where they self-sabotage the relationship unknowingly. They are in some way validating themselves, validating the feeling that they are not worthy of love and they are not lovable, and this relationship was destined to fail, and you would walk away and leave me and abandon me like everybody else in my life did, and now it's happened. That's what we see here. And not to get into too many details, even when she is in relationships with people, she finds it difficult to securely attach, okay? So that's that dismissive avoidant thing where they just keep you at a distance. They want love, but you know, they're scared to reach for it, and then when they reach for it, you know, it's kind of hot and cold. She had men that were pining over her. They clearly wanted her, and she'd never settle down with them. Maybe she'd mess around for a bit, and then they'll break up, and then they'll come back. These kind of dynamics just to avoid the fear of being abandoned. So we see her in present day 2000s, and she is probably in her 40s. Her best friend has already had a child as a teenager, and she's alone. She's successful in her media career. She has a TV show, but she doesn't have a child. She doesn't have love, and she has decided she's probably one of those people that don't deserve it, that that it's not for. She has a career, she's a moving and shaking woman, and she doesn't need that. But at her core, deep down inside, the story she tells herself is that she's not worthy of love and she's not worthy of those things. She starts a relationship with this nice charming guy, Max Brody, played by John Michael Acker, and he doesn't even know who she is the first time they have their rom session, and he falls in love with her and she pushes him away. And honestly, I'm looking at him and I'm wondering, like, do you have any dignity? Do you have any self-esteem of your own? Because you can love someone, yeah, you can want to be there and all of that, but you need to also love yourself. Do not tolerate disrespect. Okay, that's a topic for another day. I could make a whole video on that if you want me to. But there's a level of just utter rejection from someone that you love, and just disrespect to your person that you're like, you know what, I love you, but you're not okay, and it's not my place. That's a journey for you to like deal with, and if you actually do want to heal, I'm here, but I'm not going to keep being the emotional punching bag that you just put these things on. You know what I'm saying? So that's how I felt about Max. Like, how many times does she have to reject you and then come back, and reject you and then come back, and just keep toying with you like this? Even though I don't think she's doing it consciously, she's unconscious, before you realize that, okay, this is too much for me, because your heart is on the line as well. So she gets pregnant, and at first she's thinking of aborting the child because she's thinking about her own childhood and how her mother should have just aborted her, because like she didn't ask to be born into a loveless world and a loveless home, and she's scared maybe she would turn out to be like her mum. After all this time, she's this old with no child and no love, no husband. Perhaps she would ruin this child's life as well. And somehow, she decides to tell Max about the baby, and she goes on to keep the child, and then she decides in one day, after saying she didn't want him in their life, that she was going to marry him immediately. Like, that was so strange. And what triggered her to decide that she was going to marry him just off the bat was actually when she ran into one of her exes, and he showed her a family photo, how he's a married man now, all settled down, and his kids, his wife, everybody's happy, and he couldn't keep pining over her and waiting for her, and he just had to go on and live his life. And then she decides that she's going to go off and marry Max like the next day. And when I saw that, what that said to me is that Tali thought that because she heard this man say, yeah, family brought me happiness, marriage, that's it, she thought that, okay, if she got married to this guy, then she would have, the baby's on the way, she'd have the family and then have the happiness. And you'd hear often Kate and Johnny Ryan talk together and mention how sad that Tali is. Tali also does drugs, by the way. She would get high and she'd do drugs, but she wasn't like an addict. She would just get high to escape when she's alone and in pain and things like that. So you can obviously see that Tali's character here is carrying a lot of emotional wounds that she is not even fully conscious of. And she has this emptiness and this void inside that she's trying to fill up with so many other things, and she's so afraid of being alone. She's thinking, okay, if I get this family, I'd be happy now. And then when she had a miscarriage, she didn't think twice. She didn't really think hard about the wedding. And when she miscarried, literally after the wedding, she decided to call off the whole wedding and the whole marriage. And I just felt so sorry for Max, because he was being rejected again, and she shut him out when the miscarriage happened. she shut him out. She wanted to throw herself into work and just forget about it. She even went on her TV show and somehow turned it into an episode and talked to the audience about having a miscarriage, but she didn't process it by herself on her own. She didn't talk about it, and most importantly, she didn't talk about it with a man who she shared the experience with. And I thought that was kind of interesting, because yes, a lot of times in TV shows, in movies, in reality TV shows, when a miscarriage happens, there's a lot of focus on the woman, and I understand it was her own body that the attachment was being formed to another person, so she had to go through the experience. But there's also the experience of men, and I think it would be interesting to see more of that in television and storytelling, where we get to hear more of the perspectives of the men, the expectant fathers who were also expecting a new life into this world and lost it. I'm sure there are probably research studies that are qualitative in nature that have probably considered this area of research, so it would be good if storytelling kind of looked into that to make the story more accurate. Something really important that happened that was really significant on one of Tully's birthdays when she was a teenager, after they got back home from the whole fiasco the mother created by taking them to a restaurant she couldn't afford and they kicked them out. She was drunk and she told them that they should never let anything stand in the way of their dreams, not men, not children. And there was this look she looked at her daughter's face when she said not children, and that just basically shows that in Tully's mother's view, and her mother's name was Cloud, from Cloud's view, Tully was what stood in the way of her life. She had her when she was pretty young, and she felt that Tully was the reason why her life turned out the way it did, which of course is not true, because you are completely denying accountability for your own actions and the life you made for yourself. You decided to have sex and have a baby and keep the baby and raise the baby, so now being a horrible mother to this child because you had a child you didn't want to be tied down with, and I just want to make a note here. Having a child is a serious responsibility. It really, really is. No matter the number of cute pictures you see on social media and you're like, oh my gosh, I just want to have a baby, my ovaries, blah blah. Please, bringing a human being into this world that you're responsible at least for the first 18 years of their life is a serious thing. You could literally mess them up severely. You could traumatize them. You could seriously ruin their lives. So really think about it, and think about it really well before you decide to have and keep a baby. And honestly speaking, Cloud is a person that should have never had Tully and should have never kept her, and she really, really damaged her psyche so severely that this is a woman that is so insecure despite all the bravado. Yes, sometimes all the brute force you see people showcasing, all that bravado is often a mask for a very scared little child inside. Someone that was not protected, someone that wasn't loved, someone that was abandoned. And Tully was a very, very brave girl. In school, in her friendship, which I will get into much later, with her friend Kate, they would bully her. This guy that raped her went around, typical high school thing, told everyone she's like a slut or whatever, and people were like making fun of her and things, and she somehow still held her chin up and carried herself with like dignity and class. And honestly, like, she's brave. She has a very brave face she wears for the world. She comes back home to a very sad house. She lives a very sad life that she now carried into adulthood, and somehow she still smiles and she's still, the show of her life just keeps going. And I think she probably told herself, if she became someone important, if she became this beautiful, great, successful person, then maybe everyone will love her, or everything will be fine. And it didn't turn out that way as an adult. But I just want to say Tali was one very brave girl, and I think we could all just look a little deeper when we look at people, because there is often a whole lot more than we see. And sometimes the loudest, the bravest, boisterous of all, most even fun-loving people, or at least people that appear to be, might be the saddest people in the bunch. That's a lesson right there. Alright, so next right up we have Kate Malarkey, and Kate here is more so a person that is really codependent, okay? When I talk about the codependency section, which is the third section of this video, I will dive into how she and Tali's dynamic work. But I'd like to say Tali is also codependent, because once there is co in that word, that term in a relationship, both of them are. For instance, who is the taker and who is the receiver, or who is the compulsive giver rather. So right here, Kate is like the compulsive giver type of person. She feels like she always has to be needed, and I think that's how her and Tali's relationship works. And I think she grew up feeling like she was never truly really seen by anyone, and for that reason she felt that she had to earn the privilege of being loved, earn the privilege of being seen or recognized or anything like that, and having to compulsively work to gain affection and gain attention and things like that. And you see it even when she got a job at the office. She started working, she is trying to clean up after everyone, she's trying to stay back after everyone, she's volunteering for things. Like, you see people like that in life, right? Sometimes they're just really nice, and other times they are like Kate. They feel like they need to earn the attention and the affection of people, and they're not worthy. So you can see how two versions of not being or not feeling worthy or not being enough can present itself. This is very different from Tali, but this is also another representation of how someone can be feeling like they're not enough and they have to do so that maybe now people will look at me and say I'm enough. I mean, they're already great employees. They do the job, they do it well, but now they feel like they have to do more that they're often not even being paid for, just so that people can see them and recognize them. What do you have here? Tali feels like she's not enough, so she projects her image, makes it look bigger and larger than it is, makes her person bigger and hides behind that mask. And then Kate shrinks herself. She does the opposite. She feels like she's not enough, and then she literally embodies that feeling of not enoughness, makes herself smaller, makes her person smaller. She apologizes for everything. She's always saying sorry. She's always feeling insecure, second guessing herself, unsure, and she is shy to like pitch her own ideas. It almost seems like Tali is the one that kind of pushes her to do things or pushes her to reach for things. She doesn't have that much self-belief. And looking at Kate growing up, I don't really know where it came from, because fine, in high school she wasn't part of the cool kids, she was an introvert, she was a very nerdy girl with her big glasses. She would speak to Tali in the beginning, she was more self-assured. Even when she would hold her accountable for lying to her, like when she found out that her mother didn't have cancer. Other than that, she didn't really have that much space that she was taking up in life, like in school. She wasn't really being herself, so she was kind of shrinking her person in some kind of way. And it's possible that the bit of rivalry she had between her and her brother growing up, it wasn't so bad. They did have a relationship, but he would kind of blame her for things like that. Maybe it also played a part in her shaping out as who she is. But in any way, you have a person here that likes to be needed, that needs to be needed, and is always just compulsively stretching herself so thin to be there for everyone, while at the same time not really having the courage to go for what she wants. And for example, she liked the Johnny guy, and she had a feeling that Johnny liked her friend Tully. I feel like if she could do a do-over, if she found out that, okay, maybe he likes her and he doesn't really want me, I'm just gonna not go for him. I'm just gonna go and find someone that sees me as I see myself, that sees the value in me and loves me, okay? But you need to have self-esteem to be able to make that kind of move. You need to be whole, you need to be secure, you need to be just a whole as a person, for you to be able to make that kind of move. So what happened here is she was with a guy that didn't really see all of her. Okay, her husband wasn't a terrible guy, but yeah, he kind of had the hots for Tully for a very, very long time when they were working together. And she wasn't his first pick. Kate wasn't his first pick. He actually even slept with Tully before he went with Kate, and it feels like they only got together because circumstances somehow made it possible. And he would often say, Kate, you're just so easy, things are just so easy with you. And sometimes I've seen scenarios where it's like a compliment. A guy says, you're so easy, because it means you guys just mesh beautifully, but that's not what he meant. In this context, Johnny saying you're so easy means that he literally didn't have any work to do. Kate was doing the work for her and him in the relationship. She was doing everything, because she wanted him so much, and she didn't see any value in herself to know that as she is already enough. She doesn't have anything to prove to anyone, and she knew what she was bringing to the table as a person. But her not being aware of that, her not being aware of who she is, makes it so easy for people that she shouldn't. I have a friend that says there are people that you dated that came into your life that you shouldn't have even spoken hello to. And I'm not saying that Johnny is a bad guy. He's not. He's a great dad. But he didn't really see her like that, and she ended up almost having an affair. Okay, so she stayed at home, became a stay-at-home mom to take care of the children, and I guess after going through her whole life of not feeling seen by anyone, she found someone that saw her for who she was, and she was attracted to that person. And then the husband found out, and he wanted to divorce, right? So that's basically how the story starts. We didn't actually see what happened. We didn't see the texting behind or anything like that. We just find out that happened, and her husband Johnny couldn't take it, so he wanted to leave, and he wanted them to get a divorce. And it's just one of those cases where you're like, well, she didn't really cheat on you, so why can't you just forgive her, right? And I'm not saying that you're obligated to forgive anyone for cheating or almost cheating on you, and I'm not saying he should have, but It's just one of those cases that you know that the issue is not really the cheating problem, it's bigger than that, and that issue is not really something that he could solve, because for him work came before everything else. He pursued his work and his career in such a way that she even said it, that he couldn't really see her. It was always all about that goal and thing he was chasing, and he didn't really see her and all of her and things like that. And it was so obvious to me, like I knew the story would turn out to be something like that as we went on in the show, that I would find out that this was the kind of thing that she was seeking. And I'm not saying it's right to cheat, it's not. But being a codependent, they also often feel like they can't take control of their own lives. So many times you find Kate saying she doesn't know what she wants. You know, it's easier to just go on with someone else's plan. And she went on with Tully's plan. Tully wanted to get into media. Tully wanted to be the face. Tully wanted, I think Tully was really the driving force behind the kind of school they went, the course they studied, the classes they took, the companies they worked for. There wasn't much of Kate's involvement going on there, because you don't have to deal with your own life if you're busy helping other people deal with theirs, and you're just a party on your own boat. You're just joining in their own plan. You're basically supporting character, supporting role in their own movie. And many times you find codependents doing this, where they play supporting roles in other people's lives, and then they don't get to sit back and think about their own lives. So you find her saying, I don't even know what I want. Like, I don't know. Do I want this marriage to work? Do I want us to get back together? So that just shows you, when you've lived your whole life playing supporting roles, when it's time for you to be the main star of your own show, you don't know how to be. And I think for Kate, that's what much of her journey is going to be, especially as you could see when she finally put the marriage to rest and decided that, okay, you know what, we are not going to get back together. And seeing what that new chapter of her life is going to be like now. Her child is already a teenager. Very soon she's going to go to college. She's going to be alone. We see her trying to re-enter the workforce after an almost 2-decade gap. And, seeing her trying to start dating again as an older, more mature woman in a very different time and age, the mobile smartphone type budding stage of the age. And seeing her make this transition, I think, is what part of the story is going to be as we go down. Obviously, this is the first season, and I think we're going to see more of Kate trying to explore that independence and kind of shed off some of these codependency traits that she has going on. You can also see that she has an attachment to her daughter. It's not too bad, she's aware enough to understand that, her daughter's an own person and stuff. But often with codependents as well, they have this attachment to their child where they're trying to live their lives through them. Okay, they're trying to live their lives through their child, and they cling to them even harder when they realize that, oh my gosh, I have been playing supporting roles in other people's lives. My husband is leaving. My marriage that I built for so many years has crashed. My daughter is growing up, and I don't have a career of my own. I don't have dreams of my own. What am I going to do now? And they start to freak out, and sometimes they start to cling onto their child or children even more, and it creates a very unhealthy dynamic. Now, that didn't play out here, but it can happen in other situations. And that brings us to the end of this first part of the analysis. If you've liked it so far, please like this video and comment your thoughts. And if you'd like to see more where I talk about the codependency dynamics between these two characters that I have analyzed, join me in the next video. Love you. Bye.